So there you go. Well, welcome. Some of you know I do this whenever I have the opportunity to work with, and I may not stay up here, just in a warning. Years ago at HRET, they used to video all of these, and so if you're doing that and having your video cameras on, I might disappoint you. They actually put white tape in a box, and if you've known me very long, you know I don't sit in a box very long, so that's just the way it is. But some of you know my family story, so here we go again. Who's from Hutchinson, Kansas? You are? One person? Two people? That's because all the rest of them moved to California. So my grandfather was born on Cow Creek, just north of Hutchinson, Kansas, in 1884. Lied about his age to join the Army and go to the war in the Philippines. And was discharged at the Oakland Army base, and the rest was history. So that's where he stayed. But I do have my family name, the Tremain name goes back to central Kansas. Any of them left? You know the name Tremain at all? No. Anyway, so I always feel like I have my roots here. As we go through this, I just love to know who is in the room. Raise your hand if you're a pharmacist. Hooray. How about an infection preventionist? Excellent. IPs, did you ever expect to see more pharmacists in the room talking about this than you? You've been speaking about this for 20 years. And here they are. They've come. Physicians, got a few. Excellent. Nurse leaders. Staff nurses, frontline staff nurses. And if you're a nurse leader that does both, raise your hand. Excellent. You're critical access hospitals, right? Yep. Jack of all trades. And any other senior leaders here that I have not called on yet? Terrific. Thanks for joining us all today. It helps me kind of focus on where we're going. So I played with this title. What comes in seconds? And who's seen this movie? Who saw the original movie? All right. We're going back a ways. Would anybody argue one of the best Western movies of all time? Anybody want to argue with me? Phenomenal, terrific cast. And so as I was thinking about the CDC's 7 core elements, they really are the Magnificent Seven. Because if you don't do them, and you don't do them well, you're not going to get your goal reached. You have to do each and every one of them. But you can't do it superficially. You've got to dig in and do it. And I'm just going to call out my favorite reference right now. It's at the back end of the slides. How many of you are in the HRET HIIN? What's wrong with the rest of you? But you know what? We're really gracious, so all of our materials are free. They're not protected. So I really recommend, we're going to show the change package parts of it. I recommend you go to HRET-HIIN.org, bookmark it, join next time Michelle calls you. You'll see there's a section called Topics. Click on that, go to Antibiotic Stewardship, and you'll get the change package. And I think you all have, you got electronic copies of this presentation, is that correct? Yes? So you do this or this? Okay. And all the links should be active and accurate. So that's another way to go get it. But I think the most important resource that supports the CDC's 7 core elements is what the National Quality Forum put out subsequently. So it's the NQF's playbook on antibiotic stewardship, and we're going to be drawing from that today. And it's a terrific resource for all of you. It looks like it's long, but it takes each of these core elements and breaks it down, explains it. Michelle's got the copies in the back there of the change package, and explains it, and then says, if you're just beginning to tackle this core element, here are some suggested ways for you to start. And if you are already doing fairly well at it, here's advanced work that you might consider. So specific examples tied to where you are in each of the core elements. And I think that's powerful, instead of just reading the list. Because the list can leave you a little bit empty, like leadership. Okay, great. Well, what is that? How do we get that? So we're going to talk about a lot of these things. Okay. What is an antibiotic stewardship program? This is what it is. A smaller group, I'll ask the question before I show the slides. It is a structure. So, anybody ever heard of a man named Avitus Donabedi? Donabedi. Donabedi, anybody heard of Deming? So Deming is the father of all quality improvement in every industry. And Deming briefly was a brilliant process engineer and statistician who worked with General MacArthur on the rebuilding of Japan. And when he was done, when he was finished with his work there, he came back to offer his expertise to the three major Detroit automakers. Well, they're making cars hand over fist. They frankly don't care if they're broken when they get to the dealership. We'll fix them later. The demand is huge in the post-war boom, and Deming does not get a job. So he goes back over to Japan, and he works with this fledgling automaker who was, and still is, Japan's largest sewing machine maker. And that company is Toyota. And they hired Deming, and Deming, when you talk about the Toyota production system and lean and all those things, that's Deming. That's Deming's fingerprints on all of those. His understudy back in the States was Avitus Donabedi, who in his graduate thesis wrote, I think, the most important equation in all quality. Structure plus process equals outcome. You have to have structure. Structure then drives the work. Process, the work must be done correctly, and then you get the outcome. So if you think of an EMR with an order set for community-acquired pneumonia, that's structure. Okay? If you're doing sepsis service criteria at triage, that's structure. The process is how it's actually done and whether it's done correctly or not. But at least you have in place a structure. You cannot get a reliable quality without structure and process. So this is the first piece of the structure. It is a program. It's not a fad. It's not the Book of the Month Club. It's something that you need to put in and build and build and build and constantly make better. You're not going to do it overnight. How many of you have not yet started? Not yet. We're talking about it. You haven't put together any formalized structure for antibiotic stewardship. Come on, be honest. Come on. Thank you. There's 3 honest people in the room. 4, 5. The rest of you all have a program that's in place, correct? Well, Michelle, we can adjourn early. We're done. So, I'd love to come visit. Anyway, my parents are both teachers. You know the trust and validate thing? Okay. So, it's a structure. And a structure doesn't mean you have a document. Those of you who have worked with me long enough know I really don't care about policies. I'm a doctor. I don't care about policies. Why don't doctors care about policies? Why don't nurses care about policies? Because they were written by somebody sitting in an office that sits on a shelf somewhere and it doesn't represent exactly how the work happens. So if you ever want to write your policy and procedure, don't do it until you actually figured out how to do the work. Then go write it. If you write it first, makes no sense. How many of you take a vacation and have an itinerary for every day, almost hour by hour? How's that go? How's that work out when the plane's delayed? So it's a structured program that helps you select the appropriate agent, the dose, the frequency, the duration, and the route of administration. The route thing is getting kind of fun. We've got antibiotics that we didn't have when I was in training that actually have equal bioavailability, POs, they do IV. So that wasn't always true in my career. Here are the goals. Don't talk about money. You want to stop this dead in the water with a physician and say it's going to save somebody money. We don't care. I shouldn't say we don't care about money, but we care most about the correct care for our patients. Our duty is not to the hospital's bottom line. Our duty is to the patient in front of us. And that could be you or your loved ones. But it doesn't mean we want to be silly about how we spend money. So, can we put together a program that will allow me as a physician to do my duty to the patient in front of me, which means give them the best, narrowest spectrum, targeted antibiotic for their infection, and save the hospital money, and improve resistance in the community. Can we do that? Yes, it's called antibiotic stewardship. And that's the key. Everybody wins. It's an all-win. It's not one of these fake trade-offs that we sometimes told. I remember early in my career, I was asked, do I want to provide cheap care or quality care? Well, I don't know about you, but quality care is care done once right the first time. And that makes it cheap. So this is something for everybody. Everybody gets it. But so you might have different ways of selling this to different folks in your organization. I'm fine with you telling the CFO the data in every other place. It pretty much looks like he or she's going to save money. But that should not be the major point of discussion at the medical staff committee, or they will turn it off. Does it work? How many of you are doing this and have seen results? Okay, I knew I wouldn't stay up here. Can we get a mic? Or a mic runner? I wait and see. I don't tell them what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm doing, so it's fine. You never know what's going to come out of my mouth. So you never know what I'm going to do. But I'm not here to just talk all day long. I really want to work. Who are we putting on the spot? This young lady right here. So what are you doing and how's it working?
We started making sure that they had the duration of the antibiotic, and then once they were able to take PO, we went right on the PO instead of keeping them on the IV if it was appropriate.
And everybody died because you did it too fast, right?
Some people are still not buying into it.
Yeah. And do you have any bad patient outcomes because of this program?
No.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, and who are you? Where are you from?
I'm Glenda Wheeler. I'm a nurse practitioner at Gulf County Medical Center.
And where's that?
It's in Quinter, Kansas.
Quinter, Kansas. Everybody know where Quinter, Kansas is? Okay, some of you do, so come meet her at the break and find out how they're doing this. Critical access? Excellent. And now we'll go back up there just one. So, I might, because it's a big room. So the key thing is here, I probably should. Too big a room. So the key thing, though, is you can make it work. You can make it work. Have you seen any dollars and cents return on this yet? Yeah, saving money? Yeah. Show me IV meds that are cheaper than PO meds, not to mention all the costs of administration. Okay, so this is something I think that's really important. You need to have this etched into your brain. So everybody know what an elevator speech is? Even though some of you may not have elevators? They're called hallway speeches. And what's an elevator speech? You've been looking for somebody, you know there's somebody you want a buttonhole about this program, and you've been looking for them, you've been looking for them. Then you run into them in the hallway, just serendipitously. And that's when you go, No. Have that speech. Know what you're going to say in 30 seconds to that key target person when you happen to run into them. Know what you're going to say, and then say it. And that's called an elevator speech. So it's very important, because you're going to have to maybe emphasize something a little different depending on who your audience is. Okay? It's not dishonest. There's something for everybody. Now, does it work? So the UK has a system. It's got issues with this system. They have system of care. And systems of care allows them to generate tremendous amounts of data and to implement programs nationwide. And so I think this is a fascinating slide. This is now several years old. But I want you to take a look at this slide. Put my glasses on and we'll read it together. So the dark blue line is the number of cephalosporin doses in England, not the whole UK, just in England, from 2004 to 2009. The sort of teal-colored line is FQ doses, fluoroquinolone doses during the same period of time. And the orange line is C. diffs in patients greater than 65. What do you see? The lines track each other perfectly. So there you go. This now we're talking 11 million doses of cephalosporins and FQs, and we're talking starting with almost about 45,000 cases of elderly C. diff down to 12,000. Who can help me? What's the mortality rate of a geriatric patient with C. diff? Low or high? Yeah. So I don't know the numbers on that, but if they cut their C. diff cases from 45,000 to 12,000 in 7 years, I have a feeling they saved a lot of deaths. So it works. It absolutely works. We've seen data that shows that In hospitals, hospitals with enough size to generate their own data, they can track this over time. They can look at their days of therapy of FQs and cephalosporins, and they can track it right along with their C. diff rates. Big university medical centers, they can do it unit by unit or floor by floor. So we know it's local. We know it's local and it works. It's not just big numbers issues. Now, this is stolen directly from the Antibiotic Stewardship Change Package. And this is our goal there on the left side. But these are the 5 things as we work together as a team to develop what we thought were key drivers. So a key driver is something that you need to do. And then the secondary driver are the things that you do to help make that happen. And then you have change ideas. Then you actually have to implement these things. So if you're not familiar with the driver diagram, those of you who are in the HIIN and have been looking at the change packages over the last 6 years should be familiar with the driver diagram. But here they are. You have to create will. Let's just start right there. So the IHI many years ago came up with another equation I like, that if you want to implement change, it requires only 3 things. Will is first. If you don't have will, it doesn't matter. Ideas and execution. So you have to have will, you have to figure out, you have to learn and steal. The IHI has another great phrase I love, 2 of them. Steal shamelessly and adopt and adapt. So you just can't parachute things in from other hospitals, but steal their ideas and figure out how they will fit into your work. And so this is what you have to do. It's will. It starts with will. I mean, ideas, we can find ideas. Execution's a little harder, but the ideas are the cheap part because they're all over. You get it from your friends, from your colleagues at other hospitals, from a collaborative like this, from a change package, from any of the key documents that I reference, but you have to have will. And so if you really aren't where you want to be or on the trajectory that you want to be at your organization, your first and foremost job is to go home and figure out how you can create will. More will. More will maybe than you have right now. More commitment. That generally starts at the top. And it's not lip service. It's not a signed document saying, sure, it's a good idea. None. See you later. It means resources. They don't have to be expensive resources. They don't have to be FTEs. And we'll talk about that as we dig into this a little bit deeper. You'll see in the top line in the middle there, it says secure visible leadership. It's not just a piece of paper signed in somebody's office. For a gap analysis, I'm going to give you a gap tool from the CDC that if you haven't done it, you need to do it. And then you have to have a communication plan. You know, our friend here from Clinton said that not everybody's buying it yet. And that's okay. Everett Rogers, not too far from here, here's another name you should know if you're in quality. Everett Rogers. Why? He worked for the USDA in Iowa. What's that got to do with quality? Well, it was fascinating throughout his career as to why corn farmers would either adopt or not adopt newer hybrid corn seeds that the USDA was developing and pushing out. So is Kansas corn state? Not like Nebraska and Iowa, right? Otherwise, you guys would be the corn huskers, not the Jayhawks, right? So what he did was, or am I in Wildcat country, right? So what he found was that there were the innovators. The innovators would adopt it immediately. This is great stuff. Boom, I'm on it. I mean, how many people do you know, or maybe it's your kids, where as soon as technology comes out, they have to have it? You know, anybody in here own a Tesla? Good, I don't either. Anybody know anybody who owns a Tesla? Yeah, how long did they wait for it? I mean, they put like $5,000 down before they even knew what it was. Then they waited. I mean, a buddy of mine finally got one, 2 years. The hatchback. Okay, they're not outrageously priced cars. I mean, this car was like $45,000, which is about what you pay for a Toyota Highlander today. So, but they're innovators. They have to have the new toy when it comes out. And so there were about 2% of the farmers that did that. Then about another 15% of the farmers said, you know, let's try this. And Rogers called those champions. And then Other farmers waited to see how things worked out with the champion farmers. And when they got better yield per acre, then those guys picked it up, and they're called the early majority. And then there's another group that waited to see how all of those guys did it, and then they picked it up. But 16% of farmers basically would rather die than change their corn seed in their lifetime. And he called those, I actually love the phrase, you get to play with it, because it's somewhat considered pejorative. But hey, it's his phrase in the literature, laggards. He called them laggards. So when you're doing this, this is called the diffusion of innovation. And it applies to everything from automobiles to corn to iPhones to health to antibiotic stewardship. And so don't fall into that trap where you're going to go get one of those laggards. Because I hear this still, and it's wrong. And you're going to go, you can convince that laggard. And you can turn the way he thinks. You will make him the best proselytizer for your new church of antibiotic stewardship ever created. Much more likely, that person will suck all of your energy because the whole goal is to defeat you. So don't do that. Just don't do that. Work with the willing. I often say it's like building a church. Work with the willing. Do you go to the non-believers first and try to build a new church? Probably not. So work with the willing. Okay, that's all part of will. Find that will. Establish capacity, capability, and accountability. Let's talk about the capability first. Does every pharmacist in your organization feel comfortable managing antibiotics and making recommendations to patients? Would you raise your hand if your organization does have that capacity and capability to do that? Because there are many of them that do. Good, good. Okay? Maybe just shout out. Did they come out of training that way? Did they get a big ID fellowship in pharmacy? Have they taken some subsequent courses? How did they get this knowledge? Can you help me? Or do you know? Again, this is when you raise your hand and I need you to talk. They got shy. Please, ma'am. SIDP. Thank you. Okay, so not everybody in pharmacy, pharmacists, how many of you graduated in the last 10 years? Very few. Okay? I'm guessing, how many of the ones who did not graduate in the last 10 years have had an ID fellowship? Yeah, exactly. So, you may not be always feeling so comfortable about going toe-to-toe with Dr. Jones, who can be a grunt. So get the knowledge. So for pharmacists, I may have them up here on the slide. There's two places. SIDP.org, Society of Infectious Disease Pharmacists. You don't have to be an infectious disease pharmacist, but it's a great program. For otherwise, there's one called MADID.org, MAD-ID.org, MADID.org. It's open to everybody. If you're really trying to move forward and get started with stewardship, I think this is something that your little antibiotic stewardship team should do. A prescriber, an IP, and a pharmacist at a minimum. Everybody takes the MADID.org course. And you get moving in the right direction, and you develop that capacity and that capability. It's about $400 or $500, and your organization ought to pay for it, or they don't have will. See, I'm not talking about hiring FTEs and bringing in ID fellows. There's some things that leadership has to do to put their money where their mouth is. Okay? Match the bug to the drug. This is a pretty basic one, although I'm still trying to figure out what day did nurses stop walking patients? And leave, maybe it's different in the critical access hospitals, but what day in the big hospitals did nurses stop walking patients and say PT has to do it? Anybody know what day that was? I don't either, but it was the same day we stopped getting blood cultures before we gave antibiotics. All nurses my age were trained to walk their patients. All physicians my age would have been beaten out of our residency program for giving IV antibiotics without blood cultures. And I don't know, somewhere it went away, but we have to have them back. We have to make it easy for those blood cultures to occur. We have to make it, we can't, even the sepsis guidelines say, do not delay antibiotics for blood cultures. So that means the blood cultures, you have to be able to get them like that. Okay? You have to be able to measure like any other improvement. You have to be able to measure it. We talked about that. And then engaging families and patients. This is probably more true in outpatient arena than it is in inpatient arena, but I'm going to tell you a story, and it's a Kansas story. When we were working with the very first HIN, who remembers HIN 1, if you were in that? Yeah, we had early elective deliveries as a key indicator, right? Those babies that were electively delivered before 39 weeks, 0 days. Why? Because those babies did worse overall. So what we did was we, working with the March of Dimes, this is their national campaign, there's education going on. But you have to get the decision maker. We found in a lot of the central farmland states, the decision maker, guess who the decision maker was? About, was it the doctor? Was it the patient? Who was it?
Probably the mom.
The mom of the pregnant lady? Is that what you're saying? Yeah, not the pregnant lady. The mom of the pregnant lady. And her mom. And so they worked to try to get a lot of, grocery store signs, WIC places, all those things. But they were still missing it in places like Nebraska and Kansas. And Mark Stein had this brilliant idea. They started going to quilting groups and to find the decision makers. So you got to find the decision makers, and you bring them the data. You got to find the decision makers. And so engaging patients and families is the same for antibiotics. We can't bang on the doctors completely when the patient expects antibiotics when they come to the hospital, in ED, or the office. I've been there. You can only kick you by the door for so long before you just give up because you got another patient to see, and you give in. And you break your own rules because it's just too hard not to. It's human. It's a human thing, and it happens. What we have to work really hard at, I'm hoping health departments in Kansas and other places, I know some are working on public programs to educate patients, parents, about antibiotics and their dangers, and when they're appropriate and when they're not. So we have to upstream antibiotic stewardship and get to the decision makers, or not just the doctor. We have to get to the parents, the grandmothers, whoever it is. I think it's really important. It's particularly important in pediatrics, but it's also important in adult medicine. So if you're involved in that early elective delivery program, this is very similar. This is about called decreasing demand. It's not about, we're the goalie when the patient comes to us, or to the labor and delivery deck, but it's about decreasing that demand. And so you cannot really do this without having conversations about how in your community, how in your county, you are going to help decrease demand. Bring in the health department. Bring in the local radio station. Do public service announcements. We've seen this done across the country. Okay. That's a quick overview with a lot of detail. So here they are. Leadership, commitment, accountability, drug expertise, action, tracking, reporting, and education. So, you know where education is? I love this slide. I love the order of this. Where's education? On the bottom. Why? Why is it on the bottom? Where would it normally be? 5 years ago, or even today, where is education normally as part of a response to a bad event, to a RCA? Where's education usually? Like our first thing we do, right? And that always works, right? Now, I think it's important to remember, education is always necessary, but never in and of itself sufficient. You must educate. But if that's your plan, who's Joint Commission certified? Or DNB certified? Yeah, if that's your plan, right, what happens? Yeah, back to the drawing board, maybe type 1. Okay. I'm going to show this slide for 4 years. Who is this team? I know you don't play a lot in this state. It's the U.S. women's hockey team, right? And that improbable victory over Canada back in February. But you need champions. It really is helpful. Now, if you go do a survey of your organization, say, well, we don't have a prescriber who's a champion. We don't have, find a champion. Maybe the champion is a staff nurse. Maybe the champion is somebody in the executive suite. Maybe the champion is not one of these folks. Go find who cares about this. Who really cares about this? Sometimes there may be a personal story as to why they care about this. But you do need champions. Just like Everett Rogers needed champions, early adopters, You need those to start a program, and you can all find them. Don't tell me you don't have them. You just haven't met them yet, or you don't know that's something they care about yet. Here's the gap tool. I just took a snapshot of the top. This is that is an active link, unless they changed it. And go get it and sit down. This is a sit down, ideally with the IP, somebody who knows what happens on the nursing units, a pharmacist, and a prescriber. Again, you notice I'm saying prescriber. I don't care. PA, NP, DO, MD, I don't care. Prescriber. My daughter became an FNP last Friday, so there you go. See, I'm happy about that. Yeah, proud of it. Okay, so that's important. Now, who has done a gap tool before for anything? I'm coming to you. Let's do this. Oh, she's got a mic. I want you to describe how you actually did it. Okay? Who was in the room? What happened?
Well, we had people from all different departments in order to find out, because in some departments you don't know what other people are doing unless you get together and work out the gap tool together.
And what's your role?
I'm infection prevention.
And who are you waiting from?
Via Christie, Pittsburgh.
Okay. From Southeast State?
Yeah, Southeast corner.
Yeah. Were you surprised by some of the things you found out when you got everybody in the room?
Yes.
Remember anyone stick out in your head?
Probably some of the things that Tyler does that I didn't know. He's a pharmacist, so there are several things I didn't know as pharmacy.
How long did this process take?
A while. It wasn't even just one session.
How many hours did you knock this? How many hours before you took a break and go do something else and come back another day?
Probably an hour.
An hour? How many sessions?
3 or 4.
Was it worthwhile?
Yes.
Why?
Because we learned a lot about what each other does, and we're not overlapping.
Okay, thank you. I could not have found someone and paid them to give me the answers I wanted any better than that. Thank you. Okay, so that is what that's how you do a gap tool. That's right out of the textbook. That's how you do a gap tool. You get as many people possible into the room. Set an hour session. Recognize you're not going to need one. You're going to need 2 or 3 or 4. The idea is not to get through this. I don't need this one, I got 2. I'll just keep it. I'll keep it, and I know where I'm going. So the tool is to learn about what's going on. The purpose of the tool is not to complete the tool. It's to learn about what's going on. If you don't have any epiphanies going through this, then you're not doing it right. You got some epiphanies, I take it. So, oh my, didn't know that was happening. Yeah. Well, how do you know where to go? Okay, all right, here you are. I'm going to tell you, your job is to pick the best route by land to New York City. But I'm not going to tell you where you're starting. Or I'm going to tell you you're starting somewhere in the Rockies. How does that help you? Doesn't this sound ludicrous? Maybe you'll go east. That's about it. But yet when we don't know where we are, and we don't take the time to do a gap tool the way that she's done it, then how possibly can we know exactly the direction that we need to go and the things we need to do along the way? You can't do it. How many of you plan a vacation without looking at any of the sites that you want to see? You just go and say, I do know a couple that likes to take their road trips. By every time they come to an intersection of 2 major highways, they flip a coin. And if it's heads, they go straight. And if it's tails, they turn, they flip it again. Heads is left, tails is right. That's fun, but you might be missing the most important thing. So you have to do this by knowing where you are. So I find that her answer is not as common as I'd like it to be. So make her answer your answer and take the time to do it right. This is not a sprint. Now, I'm going to focus on 4 key strategies. Look at the literature, and what we did as a team was we went through everything we could find. All the best practices. We went through the NQF. We went through IDSA. We went through SHED. We went through APIC. On and on. Society of Hospital Medicine. And we kind of distilled all of the strategies that are out there in literature and what the pros and cons were on each one of them. So after doing this and working with many, many hospitals, and those of you who are in the HIIN, 30 plus states, 1,631 hospitals are who we work with. From northern Saipan in the Marianas Islands, which they have refused to send me yet to. I think the beaches are too white. To Puerto Rico and Maine. So it spans these United States. And so these recommendations come not just from the literature, but from what we see that works. Because after all, isn't that what's important? Okay, so these are the 4. Pre-prescription authorization, post-prescription audit and feedback, targeting high-risk, high-volume antibiotics, and something called the 48 to 72-hour time. Okay? How many of you are doing pre-prescription authorization? How many of you are doing review and audit and feedback? After the antibiotic's been ordered, you have a process to do that. Great. How many of you are focusing on the high-risk, high-cost, high-volume antibiotics? Good. And how many of you are actually doing the 48 to 72-hour timeout? Okay, good. All right. So there's some folks in the room, and we're going to hear more about this as the day goes on. But these, I think, are the best strategies as I see it played out in hospitals like yours. In our hospital span, I'm going to make one more just contextual remark. Is the smallest hospital I've been to is Culbertson, Montana, that has an average daily census of 0.5. That's it, obviously. What's the kid say business? 0.5. Remember, straight access hospitals, the average stay is 3 days. So there are days they don't have anything. And then we have Wesley down here in Wichita. You know how many beds they have? 800. So who sends their tertiary care patients to Wesley? Their sepsis patients to Wesley? Anybody? Yeah, they do a good job. Okay, so here we go. I think we're going to go through all of these, although I don't know what you're wrong way. Okay, I'm a doc. To me, this is prior authorization. This is PA. PA stands for something else in my literature. Pain in the anyway. What this means is I get to call back to the pharmacy saying there's a form to fill out. Okay? Now, pre-authorization really means that each antibiotic has a specific indication or specific indications for which it's agreed upon and appropriate to prescribe that antibiotic. If the antibiotic is being prescribed for some other indication, then you have to have a conversation with somebody and you have to get an approval. Sounds like a prior auth? So there you go. That's what it is. If you are in a hospital where you do not have 24/7 ability to get an appeal from a physician, that 24/7 capability could be in-house or through telestewardship or through a contract with a tertiary care center. We see all these arrangements. That you can't do this. Why can't you? I'm going to make it easy. So you're admitted at 6 o'clock on Friday night, and you've been on antibiotics in the past. And I know the antibiotics for your pneumonia are not going to work because you've been on 2 or 3 as an outpatient. So I order one, and it's not on the list. I get a block when I do that. What do? Do I go to her and tell her that we'll get the salt at 9 a.m. Monday morning? No. So algorithms and computers cannot practice medicine. Physicians, nurse practitioners, PAs practice medicine. So when you have a prior auth, that's fine, but you have to have a cascade of appeals. So then ultimately a decision is made. Okay? So if you are a small hospital, just forget about this, because you can't do it. You probably don't want to do it anyway. It's going to create more harm than good. It is a source of friction. We have seen these added in successful programs when they get the whole program going and there's a good track record and there's credibility and there's teamwork. Then I've seen these added in for specific beds, for specific indications, but with the ability to appeal. Okay? So I'm going to talk more about, you can see the disadvantages here. And one of the key disadvantages is the doctors don't like it. And you may say, well, that's too bad. But I'm going to say we need everybody on the team going in the same direction here. And the other thing that you have to be careful of with this is everything that's not on a prior auth, the utilization of that is going to balloon. Okay? Don't let me use this. We're all going to use this. We're going to use the next best thing. So you're going to see those go way up. And so organizations that have done this, we're going to talk about measurement here a little bit, called days of therapy. Organizations that have done this have actually seen their days of therapy have not done well go up, not go down. All right. It also can delay therapy. And that's the mother may have. Now, the post-prescription audit and feedback is what most successful organizations start with. And this is the physician orders it, and at some point after it's ordered, there is a conversation. I mean, people talk, which happens less and less in healthcare, but people talk. And it's not electronic talking. It's a phone call or something like that. Or, how many of you are in hospitals, big or small, where the pharmacist can walk to the units or are situated in the units and have face-to-face contact with the prescribers? How many of you do that? Yeah, most of you are tiny, right? Who's a big hospital that does that? There's some, they have decentralized pharmacy, or they have pharmacists out on the floors. So I'm just going to give you a perspective from a physician and from many of my colleagues I've talked to. If I'm going to take advice from somebody, I need to know who they are. I need to know what they know. And I need to know that I can trust them if they have more knowledge than I have. Is that fair? Would you want that if you were my patient? So if Joe Blow calls me, and I've never met Joe Blow in my life, and he tells me you're using the wrong antibiotic, it's like, who are you? Why should I listen? Whose license is on the line? Mine? Okay, so the more that the pharmacists have face time with the docs, the more the pharmacists can show the docs they have value-added information. And let me tell you, I haven't met a pharmacist who cares about this, that it doesn't bring value-added information to a conversation with physicians. And no disrespect to the older ones in the room, but the younger ones that are coming out of pharmacy school with a lot of knowledge that's relevant to today's emerging work. And a lot of confidence often too. And so, let them hone their stuff and then let them get out there and let them talk about it. I call this, these new pharmacists are the good drug reps. They're actually, they're detailing the docs, but about the right care for that patient. They're not selling something. So I really think that this is a key thing. And get out there. Remember, if you're not being listened to, then you have to reevaluate your value-added part of the equation. Why is someone not listening to you? And most likely it's because they don't know why they should listen to you. Just because you have initials behind your name. I mean, there's a lot of doctors I don't listen to. The initials aren't enough for me. I need to know who they are and what their track record is and why I should change my care based on their recommendations. I've had specialists I've consulted in my career that I completely ignored their consultation and wrote why in my chart. Just because they got a different degree than I do, but it doesn't mean anything. If I don't think they're bringing value add and the proper care to my patient. And so that's what the doc needs to hear from the pharmacy and from the IP, is that there's something value added. If you don't walk away with anything else today but that, walk away with that. You need to be value added. We don't listen to each other just because of initials behind it. Nor should we. What do you call the person who graduates last in his class in medical school? Doctor. There you go. All right. Now you see there are some disadvantages here. That the compliance is voluntary, it can take time to develop and all those kinds of things. But you're creating team. You're creating something special when you do this right. It can take time. But you're creating collaboration across silos and across disciplines and across licenses. And the benefits, the dividends you get from this last forever. I mean, I remember my first experience with a pharmacist. The first pharmacist I worked with was more of a traditional pharmacist. And then I was working with a young woman, and she would call me about my cases. It's like, why should I listen to you? And then I listened to her 3 or 4 times, and I pretty much knew after the 4th time why I should listen to her. Because she knew what the heck she was talking about. She knew more than I did about those specific things. I got to the point where I paged her. Okay? She made my day better. I got home earlier, and my patients got better care because of Shade. So that's how it happens. It's kind of like watching doctors adopt warfarin therapy run by the pharmacists. Once they figure out the pharmacists know what they're doing, they drop warfarin therapy like a hot potato. It's like, who likes doing that anyway? All right. Pre or post? We just talked about both. Significant reduction in the use of restricted agents occurs in both, and dollar saving. There's decreased antibiotic use in both. Be careful with pre. Because I said before, you may be squeezing the balloon. You're not letting them use this, they use 2 others. That's what happens. You don't let them use an FQ, and so they use 2 other antibiotics instead of 1. So that's just, I'm not saying that's the wrong thing to do, but be aware of that as fallout. We've seen decreased antibiotic resistance regardless of which method you choose, and they both have advantages, disadvantages, and unintended consequences. But I don't know. My MO in life has been to seek forgiveness, not permission. And I think that you're going to find that unless you have a very highly functional teamwork organization, starting with the post-prescriptive audit and feedback is going to pay you the best dividends. It's sort of like, so my son-in-law is a lieutenant in FDNY. The house he's at has 10 times as many fires per shift than any in the average in the United States. 13% of his calls are fires. And his, but he has play days too. Like when it's hot and 102 in the South Bronx, they go open up the fire hydrants and let the kids from the projects play in the streets. His next door neighbor is a NYPD, and he still can't get over the fact that people in the streets generally don't like him as a policeman, but they really like my son-in-law. And, you know, he just looked at him and said, I don't do this. You know, I rescue people from burning buildings, literally, got a word for that. And I'm the helper. I mean, you're important. You're extremely important in our society. People often don't see you as the helper. Most people see firefighters as helpers. So I'm going to use this somewhat shaky metaphor to say, as you're doing this, be a firefighter. Too often the pre-auth can come across like you're the cop. Whenever you're restricting something, people as human beings don't particularly like it. So help them get to the right place better. And the studies show that ultimately it's just as effective, if not more effective. As I said, in many of your hospitals, it's kind of your only choice. All right, antibiotic timeout. Who's doing the antibiotic timeout? Somebody raise their hand. You are. And you honestly raised it again. Thank you. Who are you? Where are you from?
It's Christy. I'm from Mercy Hospital in Fort Scott.
Okay. Where's that?
It's in southeast Kansas.
You're over there by Pittsburgh?
We're 30 miles north.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, tell us how your antibiotic timeout works.
It's driven by our pharmacist through our electronic health record with a built-in hard stop after the antibiotic is ordered.
Okay. And when you say driven, what happens?
The pharmacists interact with the physicians based on the order that the provider has placed, and they discuss the patient's condition, and they follow kind of...
And do this by telephone?
Correct.
Telephone. Not texting. Not voicemail. Not a note in the EMR, which no one reads. Unless the other 3 million notes that have been copied from yesterday and pasted. Yeah, I was a CMIO too. I know all the pitfalls of that. Okay, so what time do we have? I need a time check.
9:35.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, so that's an antibiotic timeout. Here we go. You pick a spot. It can be 48 hours. It can be, I mean, obviously the patient got started on antibiotics at 2 a.m. You're not going to call the doc at 2 a.m. 2 days later and have this discussion. So typically that's why it's the 48 to 72-hour timeout. Because if antibiotics started at 2 a.m. today, Tuesday, then we're going to have this discussion on Thursday morning. We're in that 48 to 72-hour window. Make sense? And it goes like this. Hey, doc, Joe from the pharmacy, and I wanted to know, Mrs. Jones has been on antibiotics here since Tuesday morning, early Tuesday morning. Clearly, we were all concerned she had an infection, but now this is sort of like the D or a G type. After study, what do we think she had? Now she's been with us for 48 hours. What do you think? You just go through this. I like going through this question. You don't have to be draconian about the questions, but you want to get these answers. And this is kind of the right cascade. So do you still think she's infected? Well, no. Well, then, DC everything, right? Do we still think she's infected with a bacteria? I'm going to come back to a couple things here that are really exciting on the horizon. Do we think that she is, do we have a source? Do we have blood cultures? And I would recommend if the pharmacist makes this phone call, the pharmacist checks the blood culture results before the call gets made. Otherwise, everybody's going to start looking for the blood cultures. I worked at a 60-bed hospital in Alaska, and the lead pharmacist said, now as part of our new thing, we're checking the blood cultures before we call the doc. And I said, isn't that extra work? And she said, it's good work. Because I'm prepared, it makes the conversation go more swiftly, and it allows me to practice at a higher level of my license. Love that answer. So, now we're armed with that, and we have them. If not, we talk about what do we think the organ source is. Look at their allergies, look at their previous treatment with antibiotics as an outpatient or an inpatient. And you say, do we think they're on the right drug? Okay? And then, are we getting the right dose, the right frequency, and the right route? And that's that old route thing again. But I can't take them off and put them on POs, or you are, we'll kick them out. Well, so what is my response to my colleagues who say that? That's the only reason they're here. They ought to be kicked out. Because if there's no good things that happen in hospitals, all we're leaving is the door open for bad things to happen. And it happens. Nobody should be in the hospital a moment longer than is necessary because stuff happens. So that's that conversation. If they need to be in the hospital for something other than IV antibiotics, then document it. Okay? But this hollow answer, they'll throw them out. It is a hollow answer. They either need to leave or you need to document why they need to stay. So that's how it works. So this pharmacy in Alaska, Tara Ruffner, they couldn't get it started. They couldn't get their P&T committee to approve it. Even though the IP was married to the surgeon who was the head of the committee. That couple had to take antibiotic stewardship out of the dinner table conversation. It wasn't going well. So I said, well, Tara, isn't it part of your license in the state of Alaska to be able to pick up the phone and call a doctor and talk about antibiotics? She said, of course it is. I said, do you do that sometimes? And what'd she say? Of course I do. So let's start the program. And she said, but they didn't approve it. I said, there's nothing to approve here. We don't need to have a parade down Main Street led by the drum major to get this started. Let's just do it because it's just an extension of what you've already been doing. And so she started. A week later, we had one of her a second pharmacist who was really wanted to try this and do it. And they would just pick up the phone, call the docs, and go through this. And obviously, many times they agree. But every time they disagree, I asked her to report it. The first 50 times that they disagreed. Now, she had gone through the MAD ID course. She was a fairly young pharmacist. I'm guessing she was, who knows? I never met her. How do I know who she is? But from the voice. And I'm guessing she was in her late 30s or early 40s. Okay? So she may have had some ID training, but not ID fellow trained pharmacist. And so, but she didn't go through the either SIDP or the MAD ID. And she said, of the first 50 times I called and we had a disagreement, I want you to raise your hand if you think that at least 20% of the time the doctors changed what Tara said. At least one. Come on. You think they just stiffed her the whole time? So you think the doctors ignored Tara? Okay, 20%. Come on. 40%. Keep them up, 40%, 60%. 80%. Yeah, 84% of the time they change their antibiotics to what Tara recommended. 84% of the time. 8% of the time they just agreed to disagree. 8% of the time, and the pharmacists in the room will love this, doctors begged for one more day. I'll be back to you. We don't like changing things when sick people all of a sudden get better. It's kind of one of those things. So you may have a different experience, but you don't know unless you try. But Tara was known. They knew she knew her stuff. She wasn't holed up in the pharmacy or the basement of the hospital. She was out and about. She had relationships with some of the key physicians. They respected her. And so that's where it starts. It starts with respect and trust. And then people will start engaging in this conversation. And there is nothing like face-to-face to start with. Once you have had face-to-face, then you can do it by telephone. I don't believe that it should be done electronically. I think there's too many barriers to a conversation electronically. I mean, I watch my kids, and they'll have hour conversations texting. It's like, call them. You know, I don't know if I get that. I mean, if it's more than like 3 minutes, why don't you just have a phone call? But the human piece comes through with the phone call, which I think is very important and still is a powerful impact. Plus, in the human piece, what else do you hear? So what do they say about communication? How much of communication are the words? What percent? How many? Come on, Kansas. Or call. Give me a number. You're not going to have to stay after school. You're not going to, whatever, have to drive me back to Kansas City. 10%. Yeah, it's about 12. So you're close. What percent of the of communication is facial expression? Yeah, it's about 50, 60. And the balance in between there is intonation. Right, I did this one exercise once in a class. It's pretty funny. I'll try to do this flatly for you. They put this, they put 3 words up on the board, and you had to tell them what it meant. And the 3 words were baby, swallows, fly. What's that mean? What's the purpose of what's the meaning of the sentence? Come on, shout it out. Baby, swallows, fly. Was it obvious? So what do you think? Baby swallows fly? Or a baby swallows a fly? See, it all depends on your intonation. Baby swallows fly or baby swallows fly. Same 3 words, very different meaning, and yet we're texting or emailing. Why do you think he invented emojis? There's no kidding, really. I mean, LOL and all that stuff is I'm pulling your chain, I'm not being serious, smiley face. It's because the words are by themselves misleading. So I go back to phone calls. Face-to-face or phone calls. You have to start a relationship face-to-face. I'm just not believing that you're going to, do this mail order bribery. I doubt that probably works very well. So you have to start, once you've started a relationship and you've gained that relationship, then you can do by phone calls. But this is a critical thing that needs to be a discussion. Discussion is not an email note. That's a parachute. There's no conversation. Okay? Get it? Are you with me? All right. All right. So that works. All right. This is one of the appendices of the change package. And it goes through, I'm going to have 2 slides. I'm not going to walk through each of these. I left them in your handout. So we started with pre-prescription authorization, post-prescriptive review and feedback, 40-hour timeout, formulary restrictions. I hope none of you have open formulas. How much?
15.
Thank you. How many of you have open formulas? I can waltz into your hospital, get medical staff privileges, and order Gorilla Silk. Lots of these. Whatever was the latest and greatest, 93rd generation cephalosporin with Gorilla Silk. Yeah. So what, anybody have open formulas? Good. You do? Someone does? Don't have. Get rid of it. You have to be able to reduce the choice to reasonable choices. Obviously, I'm a big believer, if you knew me, about order sets and treatment plans. So you should have order sets in your hospitals for uncomplicated community-acquired pneumonia, allergic or not allergic. And unless there's a very, 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 very good reason that can be documented in the chart, that's what the patient gets. It's not like I, Dr. Tremain, feel like something different at 9:45 a.m. on May 15th in the morning. Okay? If we deviate from our treatment algorithms, it's because of something the patient brought to the equation, not something I brought to the equation, and that deviation should be documented. When we were building EMRs, we would give drop-down menus. So the doctor could opt out. That's fine. You have to let the doctor opt out. If you don't let the doctor opt out, then the computer's practicing medicine. You have to let the doctor, because, I mean, we can't write algorithms and order sets for everything God brings to our front door. It's just not possible. All the combinations of things. So we can write for a pneumonia, but how about a pneumonia for somebody who was recently discharged from the ICU 4 days ago after a 30 days stay on a vent? That's a tough order set to write. So we have to let the doctor opt out. But I strongly believe the doctor then should be documenting his or her reasoning as to why they are opting out. And you can do that with drop-down menus that give you the most likely answers. Or you could do, if you have Epic or some of the others, you can put in a wildcard or free text. But please do not make a choice. I opted out because the algorithm was not clinically appropriate for this patient. Well, duh. That's why you didn't follow it. That's like when I learned to write death certificates, or my chief of medicine had a fit. If you ever wrote the primary cause was cardiopulmonary arrest. That's how we all die. That's not a cause. It's a route. All right, so order sets can be big, and if you've not started on order sets, CAP, community-acquired pneumonia, is a great one to start on. Well, I promised you some interesting news, but if I don't give you what's coming down the pipe, please remind me before I'm done. All right, then we got this next one. You use clinical guidelines. The change package goes into all of this. How many of you are doing PK monitoring in your pharmacies? Okay, great. So you're doing all that. So now you're targeting more of the patient's metabolic. You know, you can buy these books that'll tell you exactly when the half-life is and when it becomes subtherapeutic. Except that's for the mean population. That's not for a specific patient. And the latest thing is, it's not really latest, it's something we just learned more and more over the last 30 or 40 years, is that we need to stay cidal at cidal levels 24/7. Okay? If our drug levels dip below cidal, it's kind of like the 100 Years' War in Europe, okay, back in the 13th and 14th century. It went on for 100 years because they fought till dark, and then they rested and got strong. The next morning they fought again until dark. They rested and they got strong. If you are treating your bacteria, if you are allowing those levels to go below cidal levels, it's the same thing as letting them regroup, get stronger, multiply, and come back with resistance. So the whole push is towards cidal levels. The PK monitoring helps make sure that you are above the cidal levels at all times. Anybody doing pharmacist-driven IV to PO switches? All right, some of you are. Good. And we're going to hear more about all these things in the panel. Yes? Okay, wait a minute. We got to get a mic to you. I got it.
No, I got a loud voice.
Yeah, but not everybody has the best ears, so let's do this. Here we go. Who are you? Where are you from?
I am Dana Cabry from Oswego.
Okay.
We are a very small call hospital.
Small and Culbertson?
No, I have more patient base. We don't have a full-time pharmacist.
Oh, I was hoping this would come up. Right? So what do you do?
I don't know.
Yeah. So, I have lots. Well, no. I give you my thoughts and I will later. But we're going to have a panel address this.
Okay.
We're going to hear a presentation about telehealth and telestewardship. So we have some answers. But it's a perfect question. I knew at some point it would come up because I was listening to this CDC web event and broadcast web event, and a doc from New York Presbyterian, actually my daughter works, was interviewing this hotshot doc from the CDC, and she's talking about how CDC doc, how you need an ID doc and an ID pharmacist and all this blah 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 in my mind. Okay, great. So now we've taken care of 1,300 hospitals in the country. What about the rest? So it's just kind of when you get stuck in sort of. I spent a lot of time in the Northeast. In that Northeast academic think tank, they just don't think outside. They think from Washington to Boston is the entire world. And so finally, I loved it. The doc from New York said, "How does this work in a critical access hospital in North Dakota?" And I almost wanted to kiss him right through my computer, because that's the question, right? Not the question about how to do this if you have resources falling out your ears, but how to do that. So I'm going to ask the panel, we're going to talk about it. I am going to give you some links to some case studies, one of which is a critical access hospital in Colorado that does have a full-time pharmacist. But there are ways to do that. So save that question. Panelists, you've been forewarned. We're not going home until that gets answered satisfactorily. All right. Let's move on here. So, and this, I'm not going to go through all, I just went backwards. There we go. All right, let's talk about measurement. How many of you are using any kind of measurement at all? Or are you just getting started and kind of winging the measurement? How many of you are using measurement? Using DOT? Or defined daily dose, or days of therapy, or do you know what you're using? Yell it out if you know what you're using. Both? Okay. I think that the DOT is preferred by the CDC, and I think it's easier to calculate. So I push the DOT, and DOT is very simple. The other thing you can do is do something that hospitals can't do. There's another measurement you can do, but you can't do it. True costs of anything. I'm not talking charges. I'm talking true cost. That's the true cost of the drugs and the cost of the administration of the drugs. So you can find a way to calculate that. You could probably get a PhD. Because, you know, figures don't lie, but liars figure. And all this cost stuff goes up, and we got CEOs and everything's charges. And you know how it works. When my father had Medicare as part of a PPO, he would get his bills from the local hospital, and the bill was $55,000. Actually, he didn't have Medicare. He'd been a former teacher, he did not get Medicare. And he would have a $50,000 bill for a 3-day hospitalization, and then his PPO would settle for $3,000. So yeah, so charges are nonsense, and so we can't count charges. All right, so let's go to DOT. Here's the math. It's pretty simple. You're admitted at 2300 tonight, give an amp and gent before midnight. You receive 4 doses of amp and 3 doses of gent tomorrow. You get switched to cephalosporin on Thursday, and you receive 3 doses with the amp and gent both discontinued prior to the first dosing of, so they got no amp and gent that day. And the 4th day, you're discharged before antibiotic dosing. What's your days of therapy? Days of therapy is the number of antibiotics, not doses, not grams, the number of antibiotics, of unique antibiotics you received in a specific day, divided by the number of hospital days. And since we're dealing with the CDC, times 1,000, just for fun. So, what they get? Well, here we go. On day 1, 2300, before midnight, you got amp and gent. That's 2. On day 2, they got a bunch of doses of both, but still only 2 unique antibiotics. That's a 2. On day 3, they were switched to cephalosporin. The cephalosporin and the amp and gent were discontinued without being dosed. That's a 1 for the cephalosporin. On day 4, they were discharged before any antibiotic dosing. That's a 0. Number of hospital days. I love hospital days. How would you like it if you checked into your hotel at 10 o'clock at night and you checked out at 2 a.m. and they charged you for 2 nights? That's what a hospital does. Occupy 2 days, any minute. You talk about rounding to your advantage. Okay, so that's 4 days. So it's 5 divided by 4 is 1.25 times 1,000. The DOT is 1250. Okay? All right, it's not hard to calculate. If you're a very small critical access hospital, you can do this by hand. I've seen it done by hand. It does not take long. Just because you can find a program to do it doesn't mean it's better to use the program. Just because you can find something electronic to do, you know, doesn't mean you should do it electronically. It's still okay to do things by hand. So do what's easy and not necessarily what's, you know, sexier and in vogue. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. Okay, makes sense? Now we're going to go into much more discussion about barriers as the day goes on, but we kind of hit on all of them. And that's education and skill development for frontline pharmacists, staff development, guns and drugs. What's the front? How many frontline nurses are in here? Raise your hand. I'm going to come pick on one of you, so careful. You're a frontline nurse? No? Who's a frontline nurse and not a nurse manager? Oh, now you're all not frontline nurses. Nobody's going to get lunch till we get this solved. Come on, who's a frontline nurse? Thank you. If I had prizes, you'd get one. Okay, you're a frontline nurse. What is your role about antibiotics? Yep, you just hang them and you're done?
No.
Good. Tell me what your role is as a frontline nurse.
Well, I make sure that it is something that is not going to put my patient at risk. I want to make sure they're not allergic to it. I
Okay.
if you ordered it,
You're
I'll
gonna check allergies,
check
make
it.
sure it's the right drug.
If it looks like it's too much, I question the doctor and say, are you sure this is what you want? Is it enough? Is it not enough?
Is it too long? We've been doing this too long? She just did the dash down the hallway in 3.4 seconds?
Are we having diarrhea? Are we
Yeah.
having GI? Are we having skin issues? Whatever.
And is it time to switch to POs and send them home, right? Okay, so, or off, exactly, and discontinue. When I went to medical school, like that colleague in the back here is about my years of practice. How long were we taught to treat community-acquired pneumonia in a hospital? 10 to 14 days of IV antibiotics, and then sometimes we gave them POs to go home, just to be safe, right? Well, how many days is it now? 5. And studies are coming out looking at 3. I mean, we don't know, could go to 3 days. So if you've been in this business for a while, you're still treating community-acquired pneumonia for maybe 7 to 10 days. And so that's already too long. Is that a big deal? Yeah, every day of antibiotics has been shown. Every day of antibiotics increases your risk of C. diff. Every day. Even if it's the most mild, benign antibiotic, it increases your risk of C. diff. Okay, so thank you. There is now a statement on the CDC's website about this. There's a statement by the ANA, American Nurses Association, very clearly discussing the role of the frontline nurse in antibiotic stewardship. People, this is a community watch program. That's what it is. Okay? You can't say, not my house. This is about the pharmacists, the physicians, the nurses, the IPs, the leaders coming together to create the safest way to give effective antibiotics to our patients. It's a community watch program. Okay? That's what it is. All right. There's your resources for SIPP and MAD-ID. They're there somewhere? All right. Just about there. Again, some people try to get too fancy with their data. If you can mine your data, great. If you have a GUI overlay, that's great. If you're small, do it by hand. Do's and don'ts. Don't stop talking about saving money. Whisper that to the CFO. Don't start policing hammering outliers. Bring them into the fold. Have discussions. Use discussions within their peer colleagues. Have their peer champions talk to them. Bring it in, and then show them the data. Talk about my 5 rights, not the nurses' 5 rights they learned, but it is about the right antibiotic, the right dose, the right frequency, the right duration, the right route. The antibiotic stewardship 5 rights. Big steps. About to close here. Become knowledgeable. Become knowledgeable. So I could push education to the first, but it's for you, not for the staff. It's for you. Education, become knowledgeable. Engage physicians and pharmacists. Develop that structure and guide it. Oversee and do a proper gap analysis. Provide necessary resources. No, we're not asking for an FTE pharmacist. And then if you're a leader and you're going to shepherd this, you need to see what's happening. Don't just tell them to go forth and do that. There's a change package and the link to it at the bottom. Here is links also to Large Medical Center, Mississippi Baptist, and a critical access hospital in Cortez, Colorado. They're acclaimed at what they're doing, and they tell you their story. And it's short to read. It's like 3 or 4 pages long each. There's the references, starting with the Antibiotic Stewardship Playbook, and going down through all the key things that we did. And that's me. And with that, I'm going to stop. Are there any questions? I think your questions may be answered as the day goes on. So with that, I'm going to give it back to you.
All right.
Thanks for your attention, and thanks for playing with me.